In the hills of ancient Israel, under a sky heavy with divine promise, a story began that would echo through generations. The tale of a man both blessed and cursed. His name was Samson, chosen before birth to be Israel's deliverer, set apart by God as a Nazirite, forbidden ever to cut his hair or taste the fruit of the vine. Yet beneath his legendary strength lived a truth few dared speak. Samson, the mightiest man who ever walked the earth, was also the loneliest man alive. This is the story of how immense power could not shield him from isolation, betrayal, and heartbreak, a story of faith, fury, and the desperate hunger for connection. Long before Samson's birth, an angel appeared to a barren woman named Manoah's wife, promising a son destined for greatness, a deliverer against the oppressive Philistines. The angel commanded that the boy never touch wine, never cut his hair, and never defile himself, for the Spirit of the Lord would rest mightily upon him. Manoah and his wife obeyed faithfully, raising their son in the quiet hills of Zorah, watching him grow stronger and stranger with each passing year. Even as a boy, Samson felt different from other children, his uncut hair marking him as chosen, his immense strength setting him apart from everyone around him. Other children feared him, elders whispered about him, and even his own parents struggled to understand the burden God had placed upon their remarkable son. As Samson grew into a young man, his muscles rippled with impossible power, yet his heart ached with a solitude that no physical strength could ever mend. He wandered the vineyards of Timnah alone, watching Philistine families laugh together, wondering if he would ever belong to anyone the way they belonged to each other. Samson's calling separated him from ordinary friendships, ordinary love, and ordinary life, forcing him to walk a solitary path few could ever comprehend or share. His strength terrified those around him, and fear, as Samson would soon learn, rarely invites closeness. It only builds thick walls between fragile human hearts. One day, traveling through Timnah, Samson saw a Philistine woman and immediately desired her, ignoring his parents' pleas to marry among his own people instead. Desperate for connection, even forbidden connection, Samson insisted on marrying her, believing perhaps this woman could finally fill the emptiness gnawing at his lonely soul. On his journey to Timnah, a young lion suddenly attacked him, but the Spirit of the Lord surged through Samson, and he tore the beast apart with bare hands. He told no one of this miraculous feat, carrying the secret alone, another moment of extraordinary power that only deepened his isolation from other people. Later, passing the lion's carcass again, Samson discovered a swarm of bees and dripping honey hidden inside it, a strange sweetness born from death and violence. At his wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to 30 Philistine companions, wagering fine garments, hoping perhaps games and laughter might finally earn him friendship. The riddle spoke of sweetness from the strong, referencing the lion and honey, a secret only Samson knew, hidden deep within his solitary heart. Unable to solve it, the frustrated companions threatened Samson's new wife, forcing her to weep and beg until she pried the answer from him. Betrayed by his own bride within days of marriage, Samson realized painfully that even intimacy could be twisted into another tool of manipulation and loss. Furious and humiliated, Samson killed 30 men in Ashkelon to pay his debt, then stormed away from his wedding, alone once again, seething with anger. His wife was given to another man, sealing his abandonment, proving to Samson that trust brought only pain, and love brought only devastating betrayal. When Samson later returned to reclaim her, he discovered she belonged to someone else entirely, and grief twisted quickly into a burning, uncontrollable rage. In retaliation, Samson caught 300 foxes, tied torches to their tails, and set the Philistines' fields, vineyards, and olive groves completely ablaze. The Philistines retaliated brutally, burning his former wife and her father alive, spiraling their conflict deeper into violence, vengeance, and irreversible human tragedy and sorrow. Enraged beyond reason, Samson attacked the Philistines with tremendous fury, slaughtering many, then retreated to a rock called Etam, hiding from everyone entirely. Even his own people, the men of Judah, feared Samson's power and betrayed him, binding him with ropes to hand him over to their oppressors. Alone, bound, and surrounded by 3,000 of his own countrymen, Samson felt the crushing weight of total isolation pressing down upon his soul. Yet when Philistine soldiers approached, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him again, and the ropes fell away like burnt thread from his arms. Grabbing the jawbone of a donkey, Samson single-handedly struck down 1,000 Philistine men, proving once more that his power was unmatched by any army. After the slaughter, exhausted and desperately thirsty, Samson cried out to God, questioning why victory could feel so hollow and utterly, achingly alone. God answered by splitting open a hollow place, water gushing forth to revive him, yet even divine provision could not fill the loneliness in his heart. Samson judged Israel for 20 years, delivering his people time and again, yet no scripture mentions a single friend who truly understood his burden. His victories were public and legendary, but his private world remained empty, a fortress of strength hiding a man who desperately longed for companionship. Later, Samson traveled to Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute, another fleeting attempt to feel wanted, even briefly, even falsely, even dangerously. The Philistines learned he was there and surrounded the city gates, planning to kill him at dawn, certain this time they had finally trapped him. But Samson rose at midnight, tore the massive city gates completely from their foundations, and carried them alone on his shoulders to a distant hilltop. Once again he had escaped death through impossible strength. Yet once again he walked away from danger utterly alone, with no one waiting for him. It was around this time that Samson met a woman named Delilah in the valley of Sorek, and something in her presence captivated him deeply. For the first time in years, Samson felt something resembling real love, a dangerous vulnerability slowly blooming inside the heart of the strongest man alive. Unbeknownst to him, Philistine rulers approached Delilah secretly, offering her enormous silver if she could discover the true secret of his supernatural strength. Delilah, torn between fragile affection and overwhelming greed, ultimately agreed to betray the one man who had trusted her more than anyone in years. She asked Samson directly what made him so strong, and desperate for closeness, he began playing a dangerous game of half-truths and deception. He told her 7 fresh bowstrings could bind him, and when Philistines attacked while he slept, Samson snapped them effortlessly, still hiding his secret. Delilah pressed again, wounded and accusing him of not truly loving her, using his loneliness and longing for intimacy against him repeatedly and cruelly. Samson lied a second time, claiming new ropes could hold him, yet he broke them just as easily, still unwilling to surrender his sacred secret. Each time, Delilah wept and pleaded, wounding Samson's heart further, exploiting the very loneliness that made him crave her approval and affection so desperately. Night after night, she begged him to prove his love by revealing everything, slowly wearing down the defenses of a man starving for real connection. Finally, worn thin by her constant pressure and his own aching need to be truly known, Samson revealed the truth. His uncut hair held his power. He confessed that if his hair were shaved, his Nazirite vow broken, the Spirit of God would leave him, and he would become as weak as any man. Delilah recognized immediately that this time he had told her everything, and she sent word secretly to the Philistine rulers waiting for this exact moment. That night, she lulled Samson to sleep upon her lap, a tender moment twisted completely into the final act of ultimate betrayal and heartbreak. A servant crept in quietly and shaved off Samson's 7 locks of hair while he slept, unaware his sacred strength was slipping silently away. When Delilah cried out that the Philistines were finally upon him, Samson awoke confidently, expecting to fight as before, completely unaware that everything had changed. But this time, the Spirit of the Lord had departed from him, and Samson stood powerless, defenseless, and utterly human for the very first time. The Philistines seized him easily, gouging out his eyes, binding him with bronze chains, dragging him away to imprisonment in the city of Gaza. There, blind, humiliated, and stripped of everything he once was, Samson was forced to grind grain like an animal in the darkness of prison. In that dark prison, alone with only his thoughts, Samson finally confronted the crushing loneliness he had silently carried throughout his entire extraordinary, tragic life. He remembered his childhood isolation, his failed marriage, his violent revenge, and Delilah's ultimate betrayal, realizing strength alone had never brought him true happiness. Blind and broken, Samson grinding grain in darkness became a haunting symbol of how power without connection ultimately crumbles into devastating emptiness and regret. Yet slowly, unnoticed by his mocking captors, Samson's hair began quietly growing back, and with it perhaps a flicker of hope and divine purpose returning. Months passed in humiliating darkness until the Philistine lords decided to celebrate their god Dagon, crediting their idol for finally capturing mighty Samson. They gathered thousands inside the great temple of Dagon, calling for Samson to be brought out and mocked publicly before the entire celebrating crowd. A young boy led the blind Samson by the hand into the temple, positioning him carefully between 2 massive central pillars supporting the entire structure. As thousands mocked him from the rooftop and below, Samson stood silently, feeling perhaps the deepest loneliness of his entire tragic and remarkable existence. Then, quietly, blind Samson prayed, asking God to remember him one final time, to restore his strength just once more for one final purpose. He placed his powerful hands upon the two central pillars, bracing himself firmly, whispering that he would rather die with his enemies than live forgotten. With one final surge of divine strength, Samson pushed with all his might, and the massive pillars groaned before collapsing completely under tremendous pressure. The entire temple crashed downward instantly, killing thousands of celebrating Philistines above, along with Samson himself, buried beneath the devastating rubble and broken stone. In death, Samson killed more Philistine enemies than throughout his entire lifetime combined, finally fulfilling his destiny as Israel's deliverer through one ultimate tragic sacrifice. His brothers and family came to retrieve his body, burying him quietly in his father's tomb, ending the earthly journey of Israel's mightiest judge. Samson's story, though filled with incredible strength and miraculous victories, remains fundamentally a tragedy about isolation, longing, and the desperate hunger for genuine connection. He was chosen before birth, set apart from everyone, and never truly allowed the ordinary joys of friendship, community, or lasting, unconditional human love. His immense power isolated him from childhood, his calling separated him from society, and his choices repeatedly led him toward people who would ultimately betray him. Perhaps Samson's greatest tragedy wasn't his blindness, his imprisonment, or even his violent death, but the profound loneliness that shadowed his entire remarkable life. He sought connection through forbidden marriage, through violence, through prostitutes, and finally through Delilah. Yet none of these paths ever truly satisfied his aching heart. In many ways, Samson represents anyone who has ever felt powerful yet unseen, accomplished yet unloved, strong on the outside while crumbling quietly within. His story reminds us that strength, talent, and achievement can never substitute for genuine relationships, honest connection, and the simple comfort of being truly known. God used Samson's flaws, failures, and crushing loneliness anyway, weaving his broken story into a much larger purpose of deliverance for the people of Israel. Even in weakness, even in isolation, even after every betrayal, Samson's final desperate prayer proved that God had never truly abandoned him at all. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson within this ancient story, that loneliness does not disqualify us from purpose, and brokenness does not erase divine calling. Samson's hair, once cut in betrayal, grew back silently in darkness, symbolizing that redemption often begins quietly, hidden, unnoticed, long before anyone realizes it's happening. His final act of strength wasn't fueled by vengeance alone, but by a desperate, humble prayer from a broken, lonely man seeking one final purpose. Even the strongest man who ever lived needed connection with God when human relationships repeatedly failed him, betrayed him, and left him utterly alone. Samson's tragedy teaches us that true strength isn't measured by muscles or miraculous feats, but by resilience, faith, and the courage to keep believing despite pain. Throughout history, Samson has become a lasting symbol of wasted potential, misplaced trust, and the devastating consequences of seeking love in fundamentally broken places. Yet he remains equally a symbol of redemption, proving that even our darkest, loneliest failures can still be transformed into moments of eternal purpose. His story spans the book of Judges, chapters 13 through 16, one of Scripture's most dramatic, tragic, and ultimately redemptive narratives about a solitary chosen man. Artists, filmmakers, and storytellers have retold Samson's tale for thousands of years, yet the deepest truth always remains his aching, unfulfilled longing for belonging. We remember him for his impossible strength, but perhaps we should remember him equally for his impossible loneliness, hidden beneath every legendary, miraculous victory. Samson never had a true companion who understood his calling, never a friend who simply sat beside him without expectation, fear, or hidden motive. His parents loved him, but could not fully understand him. His wife betrayed him, Delilah exploited him. Even his own countrymen feared and bound him tightly. In the end, only God remained truly constant, listening closely to Samson's final desperate prayer inside a temple filled with mockery and impending destruction. This is perhaps why Samson's story resonates so deeply today, in a world where many people feel surrounded by others, yet profoundly, achingly alone. His life reminds us to seek connection wisely, to guard our hearts carefully, and to remember that true strength includes vulnerability and honest community. Samson's downfall came not from lacking strength, but from desperately seeking love in a place designed from the very beginning to destroy him completely. Had he found genuine companionship earlier, someone trustworthy who truly understood his sacred burden, perhaps his tragic story might have unfolded very differently indeed. But God, in his sovereignty, used even Samson's isolation and failures to accomplish deliverance, proving purpose can emerge from our most broken, painful chapters. Samson remains forever the strongest man in Scripture, yet also one of its loneliest figures, a paradox reminding us that power and peace aren't the same. His hair grew back, his strength returned, but his deepest wound, the ache of never truly belonging, remained largely unhealed until his very final breath. Perhaps that final collapsing temple wasn't only physical destruction, but also a release, a desperate man finally finding peace after years of profound isolation. Samson's ancient legacy teaches us to value relationships over reputation, connection over conquest, and honest vulnerability over the illusion of untouchable, isolated, lonely strength. As we close this ancient story, consider the people in your own life who might carry hidden strength while quietly battling profound, invisible loneliness. Reach out, connect deeply, and remember that even the mightiest among us can secretly long for nothing more than to be truly, simply known. Samson's story ended in tragedy, but it began with divine purpose, reminding us that our lives, however lonely, are never beyond God's redemptive reach. Thank you for journeying through the story of Samson, the strongest man who ever lived, yet a man who never truly escaped his loneliness. If this story moved you, remember that strength means little without connection, and that true victory includes both power and the courage to be truly known.